morning, students. So the vacations are over and the happy days are back again. So we are back to studies, right? So if you remember the last time we were on this chapter, resources and development. We were in the middle of it rather. And today we would be, and if you remember, we had discussed about sustainable development, how the natural resources should be used carefully and judiciously, and simple profit should not be the guiding motive, whereby you are in a tearing hurry to exhaust all the natural resources which are available on the planet just for the sake of making more money. So that has to be a sustainable development. Otherwise, this show cannot go on for much long. So today we would be starting the topic land resources. Now, land resources, as it is very obvious that, of course, we live on land, as it is being said here. We live on land, we perform our economic activities on land, and we use it in different ways. Thus, land is a natural resource of utmost importance. It supports natural vegetation, wildlife, human life, economic activities, transport, communication systems, etc. However, land is an asset of a finite magnitude. Therefore, it is important to use the available land for various purposes and with careful planning. India has land under a variety of relief features, namely mountains, plateaus, plains, and islands. About 43% of the land area is plain, which provides facilities for agriculture and industry. Mountains account for about 30% of the total surface area of our country and ensures perennial flow of some rivers, provide facilities for tourism and ecological aspects. About 27% of the area of the country is the plateau region. It possesses rich reserves of minerals, fossil fuels, and forest. Students, though it's just about two paragraphs here, but this is a very important factor about our country which you need to understand, which is shown here in this chart. Plains constitute 43% of our geographical boundary of, that is, the land resources in the land of India. If you look at the map of India, what it says is 43% of it comprises of plains, whereby you have forest and you have all sorts of things whereby farmers cultivate crops and all that kind of activity, where you have factories and everything, bazaars and everything where we live, the land that we live on, all that is plains. Okay, now yes, that is plains, and that is 43% of the area of India. Now, now you can see that it's not much. If you look at the map of India, it looks like a huge geography. Where anything is possible. But then plains, when you talk about where most of the activity is centered around, it is only 43%. Right? It's very interesting. And then mountains comprise of another 30%. Now, 30% of India, just think about it. 30% of the Indian geographical mass comprises of mountains. Now, mountains, of course, does not mean always the snow-clad mountains like Kanchenjunga, where no one can live actually. But even if you look at the Uttarakhand mountains, where do the people of Masuri live? They are on mountains, of course, right? But then mountains are definitely, it is not as easy to carry on economic activities within mountains. You cannot have large factories on mountains. You cannot have extensive farming on mountains. You have certain problems expanding your economic activity to those areas, and that is the reason why in all the mountainous areas of India and even around the world for that matter, there are very few economic activities that can be carried on. Of course, fewer people can live in those places, and of course it is very difficult to as I just said, to have extensive activities. So most of the activity or the economic activity in those areas centers around hotels and a bit of cropping, and most of it is related to tourism activities. Yes. And like you see it in Missouri, some good schools are also there. So that is how it is. And then Plateau. Now, Plateau happens to be a mineral-rich area, because you have to understand one very important thing. Plateaus usually form after a great amount of tectonic activity. That is, the activities that happen below the surface of the earth, not exactly on the surface of the earth. So these areas, it could be the lava which makes the plateau, and a lot of under earth and under the surface activities lead to the birth of plateaus, and that's precisely is the reason why plateaus are very rich in minerals and ore deposits. It can be aluminium ore, it can be iron ore, it can be anything for that matter, because most of it has now come from below the surface of the earth or under the surface of the earth, and that is exactly the reason why uh, even in India, if you look at most of the large factories which manufacture steel and big industries, they are all in the Chotanagpur and the Deccan Plateau area, right? Because these areas are very rich in ore deposits. Chotanagpur area would be the areas around the state of Chhattisgarh, the state of Jharkhand. All these areas are very rich in natural resources, and similarly, the Deccan Plateau area. So, the plateau areas happen to be mostly in India and around the world for that matter, uh, industrial areas where you have large factories. Okay, so that's how it is. The field is divided. Now, coming to land utilization here. Yes, coming to land utilization. So, how do you finally decide on using these what you have available with you? Because students, you will have to understand this is not just something, a question which the Indian government or the Indian society has to encounter. Every country would have their own unique division. For example, certain countries can have planes as much as 77%. Some can have as much as 80%. And in certain areas you can have almost 60% would be mountains, and then there would be certain countries which might not have any plateau at all, right? So that is how it could be, and you would realize that maybe those countries have enormous amount of and large rivers and lakes and all those kind of things where you really cannot do much of an economic activity, right? So that is something which needs to be understood. So different countries would have their own unique divisions, so all of them would have different charts of their own, right? So naturally, the what to do with all that land and how to divide it, how to utilize it for the best of the country and the people and the community is always all of that needs to be planned extensively, right? So now coming to land utilize, these are very important questions which every society, every country has to encounter. So uh, the land resources are used for the following purposes. Forests, of course, we all know. Land not available for cultivation, barren and wasteland. Land put to non-agricultural uses, examples, buildings, roads, factories, etc. Now, land put to non-agricultural users. Now, India, as we all know, students, that most of our Indian workforce and most of our Indian population still somehow directly or indirectly is still majorly involved with agriculture. Okay, whether working as a farmer directly where you grow crops or vegetables and stuff like that, to the point of selling the output, whether in mandis or as sabjiwalas, whatever it is. So almost 60% of Indian population is still somehow related to the economic activity which centers around agriculture. But then you have to understand there are many countries who do not use their land for agriculture as much as we do, because for them all this plains would means large massive factories, right? They might not be, they could be industrial economies rather than agricultural economies. Of course, India has a lot of industries, but primarily most of our GDP and the number of people who are employed in the different economic activities is very much centers around agriculture, because you have to understand one very important thing, that if every time, and in whichever year throughout the history of India, if you have seen, if the monsoons have failed in India, then we've had a severe drought, and not just a severe drought, but we've had a severe problem of economic hardship, whereby because the crops have failed now, so the farmers have suffered. There's not much left, not much has been produced, so naturally the prices go up. People like you and I, who are even not directly related and concerned about directly with agriculture, we still have to suffer because the prices suddenly shoot up for all the essential commodities which are edible, and you can do without uh, the extra activities. I can do without probably driving my car, but I cannot do without atta, and I can't do without rice. I can't do without vegetables. That is of extreme importance. I must have it. So these things are important, and different countries work it out in a different kind of fashion. We cannot, students. We do not have the luxury of, completely shifting to an industrial economy, or indulging in in activities which are away from agriculture, because of one simple reason, that our population happens to be 1.3 billion. We are a land where 130 crore people live. Now you have to feed all these people. How do you feed them? You cannot feed them Maruti cars, and you cannot feed them pens and watches and pencils, right? They have to be fed by, you and I have to be fed by food, right? We need our 3 meals a day. We need milk. So all of that is impossible without an extensive spread of agricultural activities in our country, and that is how different countries take their own respective decisions. Now, coming to other uncultivated land, excluding fallow land. Now, what is fallow land? Students, you must have I'm sure you know it. You must have studied it in class 9. When an agricultural land, you do not deliberately use that land for cropping for a year or two, so that the land can regain its fertility. That is known as fallow land. Fallow land is not a barren land. Sometimes people confuse it with barren land. No, it is not. फैलो लैंड इज जस्ट अ लैंड वे बाय आपने जान के उसमें फसल नहीं बोया है, सो दैट फॉर अ ईयर और टू फॉर or 2 year period, so that that land can regain its fertility, राइट? बिकॉज आपको समझना होगा कि जब आप उसमें खेती करते हैं, तो नेचुरली द क्रॉप्स आर ग्रोइंग. हाउ आर दे ग्रोइंग? बिकॉज दे आर एक्सट्रैक्टिंग minerals and nutrients from the soil itself. Right now, the soil has to be given that time. After once you have carried on with your agricultural activity for 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, then that soil usko bhi aram karne dena padta hai. So for a year or two, the farmers usually do not sow anything there, so that the land can regain its fertility, it can rest, so that it is ready again for for the harvesting from after 1 year or 2 years. So that's how it is. We shall continue tomorrow. Thank you.